Welcome to this month's Etc. talk. So we do these monthly talks just as a kind of enrichment program to introduce you to different artists, to give our artists an opportunity to talk a little bit about the development of their practice, whether that's a particular project or whether it's actually about the long-term development of their career as an artist. And this quarter, in this term, we've been focusing on planographic printmaking as our main focus. So alongside the life classes and portrait classes that we run, we like to try and point people towards the different possibilities of art making. And printmaking is often overlooked as a kind of potential avenue of exploration. And conveniently, this month, Scarlett's published her first book, Alternative Lithography, which she's going to tell us a little bit about. And we thought this would be a really nice chance to find out a little bit more about her work, as well as to talk a bit about the development of the book and her online classes, and then about the development of her larger practice as a printmaker and artist. And Scarlett, in a moment, I'm going to switch over to your screen if you wanted to say a little hello, but I'll give you a moment's warning. Is it okay if I switch over to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, I'm going to switch over to you there. Hello.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming along.
Firstly, just give us a quick introduction to you.
Um, I am a printmaker, a planner. Well, I describe myself as a planographic printmaker because I work with stone and alternative lithography, but I have cheekily included some relief prints in this talk as well. But I guess I'm an artist and I'm an educator, and I think that the education part of my practice is a really vital, quite big part of that as well. And I will go. I'll go into all of that, I guess, as soon as we start showing the presentation.
Let's do that then in that
Yeah,
case.
so jump straight in.
Let's jump straight in. Yeah. Over to you. Tell us what's going on here.
I thought I would try and include as many sketchbook pages and things in this talk as I could, because I think you can find a lot of finished artwork of mine and everyone's, I guess, online. So I thought it would be a nice opportunity to take a slightly more intimate view into some of my work as well. But I thought it would be a good place to start at the beginning of my creative education, I suppose, because I took a slightly different route to that, which is common. So I did a foundation, an art foundation, which is a fantastic course here in the UK after A levels and before university, if you're taking that route. And since chatting to a lot of folks, it turns out that my art foundation was fantastic, really good color theory and all kinds of stuff that I think other folks didn't get, which I loved it at the time and thought it was great. But objectively, apparently, it was also very good for that. So I'm very fortunate in that way. And then after my foundation, I went on and did an HND in printed textile design because I wasn't, I didn't want to do a degree. I wasn't quite ready. No one in my family at that point had done a degree. So an HND is a higher national diploma, which is the equivalent of a level 5, which is like the second year of a degree. But it's much more well, we were taught a lot about how to start your own business and how to do a tax return and a business plan and how to promote yourself and all of this brilliant skill that actually means that you can start working as an artist after the course. And it was very, very like technical based. So I thought I would share these insights into a little bit of what I did so you can get an insight into my brain a little bit. So at that point, it was lots of screen printing onto fabric and devore and understanding fabric. So this sketchbook on the right hand side is a burns test, so trying to identify the fibers that you're working with from what happens when they burn, which is really fun. And then the sketchbook on the left is like the recipes for dyeing the fabric. So yeah, but I'm quite a technically minded big nerd, technical nerd, really, which I think if anyone has been on my Patreon or even just chatted to me, then you will know about my technical file of all the different tests and things that I love to explore.
I was going to ask about that because obviously that's something you've kind of developed over your entire working life. It's an amazing personal resource, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah, I love it. I mean, I did have a textiles technical file, but that has been lost to the ether, and which unfortunately, but hopefully, taken on by some other students and found and given a new life. But my printmaking technical file is oh, it's full of like notes and scribbles, and every time I try something, or if someone suggests something, I'll try it and I'll write down all of the notes. And I always say to my students that you should start with a test plate if you when you're printing, so that you can test and exploit and explore, and then rather than trying to make an image. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But I always try to, and then you can put that in your technical file, because you can't expect your brain to hold on to everything. So it's nice to be able to look back through the file and understand what you've done and problem solve a little bit. And yeah, it's great. Oh, it's really lovely to look through. It is like yeah, like a big sketchbook, but for lots of tests and things like this. um, shall I move on to the next slide? Yeah.
That would be lovely. Thank you.
Here we go. So, um, so after my my HND, I worked briefly as within textile design, and didn't feel too comfortable there, because I didn't feel fulfilled with the design element, just the design element of it. So then I moved more into an illustration sort of focus, but I thought maybe it's some narrative and some an application to the work would be more fulfilling. But again, it didn't sit quite right with me. So it was only really maybe like 10 years after that that I found myself in fine art printmaking, and really felt at home with the other printmakers, and the meaning that I gave to the work, that didn't have to be like for someone else's brief, and it didn't have to be for just for a surface. It could be exploring some ideas of just my own thoughts and my trying to understand the world. But within all of this time, I've been teaching as well and working with other folks. So I put together a few of these pictures from projects that from many years ago. And there's a delightfully silver shoed 21-year-old Scarlett there next to this tree, holding a bag actually that I designed for a textile artist there as well. Um, so these are all like community projects that I worked on. After I finished my course, I graduated, and I volunteered with an art centre and with other projects, and worked at the college. So it was wonderful to be working with the community on so on this tree we were gathering people's um, thoughts and dreams for the town that we were in, and we brought them, gathered them all together into this tree, to hope that those dreams would grow and blossom together. So that was a nice sort of like almost like a memory tree. And then I worked on a mural in a different town as well. And this bottom right one is it was a really fun project, and I actually I can't remember where this idea came from to make sellotape, sticky tape sculptures of people. This is when I was working at Letchworth Art Centre, and the women in charge there had like fantastic, incredible ideas, and then she would be like, "Okay, team, make it happen," and we were like, okay, brilliant, great, let's cast people in sellotape. So we made 14, I think, sellotape sculptures of notable people of the town. And then there was a trail where we put them around the town, and folks had to try and find them all and learn about the history of the town in the same way. So there were the designers of the town, the architects and suffragettes, and Samuel Pepys, who passed through, and this was James Mayhew, who's a children's book illustrator, who who looks very much like this sculpture, so it was very, very accurate. And we worked on some other projects with him as well. So yeah, that was great fun. If anyone wants to know about how to cast yourself in sellotape, I'll share those secrets another time, or maybe at the end.
Kind of like an affordable Anthony Gormley installation sort of throughout the
Yeah.
town. I love it.
Yeah, it was really, really fun. And it was nice to be sort of at a point in my, I guess, in my practice and in my career where I didn't really know what I wanted to be doing, or what I wanted to be making, or what I wanted to be sharing with the world, I suppose. It was nice to be working with other people and just sort of connecting in a human way with people, and just like forming relationships and just like experiencing the world and doing fun, silly, artistic things. Yeah, it was a really valuable thing to do. So yeah, I recommend everyone volunteer with an arts organization if you're in a position where you can and you need to be inspired, I suppose. And lastly, this top picture is from an evening class that I was teaching throughout that as well, with them still doing some textile print. Yeah.
And at that kind of stage, did you have a personal art, artistic practice, as you might understand it now?
Not really. No, no, I wouldn't say so. I was at a point where I was trying to understand, still taking on lots of technical things. So the more I learned about printmaking, the more I wanted to know about it. So like rather than doing like a degree course, I actually would like seek out certain artists that I really like their work, and I would do a course with them, or I would just go and talk to them. And I would like want to understand how how they made their work, and in that same time to have a nice conversation with them about it as well, rather than like commit to something at a point where I didn't know myself well enough, or I didn't know my creative practice at all at that point enough to commit to a certain pathway. And I think that's still something that I do now. Like in recent years, I got some funding to spend some time with some master lithographers, because that's a process that I wanted to develop more myself. And there isn't anywhere in the UK currently where you can do a focused course just on lithography, like there is in like the lovely Brian did in the last talk at the Tamarind. So instead, I decided that I really like this printmaker, so I'm going to spend some time with this printmaker and understand how they work, how they make their amazing work, and also try and like form an intimacy with them to sort of understand and get a bit of mentoring from them at the same time. If that makes sense.
It does, yeah. Thank you.
Should we move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's.
Yes, so now we are with some actual artwork of mine, a cheeky bit of relief printing, even though this is the planographic term. Apologies for that. um, so This is a print, one of the first prints, I think, that I made, where I felt like I was properly communicating some thoughts and ideas about like developing a practice, I would say, rather than just like making imagery and printing something and understanding the process. I was thinking more about the ideas behind the imagery, I suppose. So this piece of work was inspired by, or informed by, or just like is the result of my thinking about evolution and afterlife, and those sort of conflicting ideas within my own head, and trying to understand those, like those big questions about what happens to us after we die, and what happened to us before, and like where we came from and where we go. So I was thinking a lot about fish. And folks tend to think that I know a lot about fish, but I don't know anything about fish. People ask me about, oh, what is this fish? Like, I don't know, it's pretty. It's a really nice fish. But I was really interested in the idea of like about organisms like developing from fish type forms, and then where we go after that in the next phase of development. So I sort of brought those things together within this, just by looking in like sort of like scales for this first print. So it's a mixture of traditional lino cut and also etched lino cut, which is a process where you apply a strong alkali paste to the lino, and it eats away in really organic ways and sort of produces slightly unpredictable markings on the lino block, which is, if anyone's ever done lino before, you know that it's a very graphic process. So wherever you carve a line, you're producing a very crisp mark. So it's nice to have these, to hand over a little bit of control to this etch, so that you get that lovely element of surprise within the process. So you can see in this this close-up that I've included a little bit more of this slightly more organic, less crisp lines, and I enjoyed the contrast between those two processes. And at that point, I was recreating my drawn lines in lino cuts. So all of these what were like scribbled lines that were taken from my sketchbook, I carved around all of those like very painstakingly. I have huge amounts of patience for carving a block, and I was chatting about this with some other printmakers like this week actually, about how I have like loads and loads of patience for carving, but when it comes to printing, I just want to ink it and then print it. So that's why relief printing is quite immediate in that way, and really satisfying, whereas intaglio printing and the process of inking up those plates is, for me, takes too long, can't be doing any of that. No, it's far too much work. But I will spend hours and hours carving these lines to make it look like I've just drawn them.
And where it says 7-layer lino cut, is that 7 different sheets, different matrices, all produced as separate images that are then kind of built on top of one another in the print?
No, this one was, as far as I can remember, this one was 2 blocks, and I was working in a reductive way. So you carve away like your first layer, and then you print what's left, and then you carve away that same block and you print on top of what you've left. So so everything sort of that print space gets smaller and smaller each time. But then some of the, trying to go back in time and remember how this was like, so the drawn element of the figure, that was a separate block, and then some where some of that brown is around the edge as well. I've got the carved element there for the just for that brown layer, I think it was, and then some etched around the edge of that. So it was 6 layers on the reduction, and then I think 1 layer or 2 layers on the other, I think.
Thank you. And just to state the really obvious, but for anyone that's less familiar with printmaking, the main reason for that is that then you can produce a whole edition of images. Is that right?
For the whole point of printmaking.
Well, yeah. Although we did talk a lot about monoprint in a previous one of these, so so yeah, because otherwise it feels like a lot of work to go into one picture.
Someone, I don't know where I heard it, but someone once said to me that that printmaking is a lot like sex. It's not just about reproduction, which I really, really like that. I don't know where I heard it, and but it was a really like I was like, yes, that's great. But at the same time, I do I do want to make like an edition of prints to then, you know, hopefully. Sell those prints. You know, I think that's the lovely idea of printmaking is that, you know, when you have a painting, you just have the one painting, and then you can keep that, or someone else gets it, or maybe it goes into a gallery, and then people who go there can see it. But with printmaking, you get to disseminate all of these like these other prints, so other people get to enjoy it, other people get to go and see it, and everyone gets a piece of it, and that's really, really exciting. But it's still a piece of art, like an object that's been made by hand with the touch of the artist, and everyone is, even as much as you try to make them identical, they're all slightly different. And actually my favorite version of this print, I've got it framed upstairs, is where I was testing out a slightly different colorway quite early on. And at that point I was like, no, that it looks terrible, it's far too pale. And then after the next maybe like 4 layers, I was still testing like the registration on that same print, and I finished it off, and it looked the best, and the paleness really worked, and it's very frustrating. So I'm glad I've got that one for myself. But you can't always, as a printmaker, you sort of need to see into the future a little bit, but it's not always possible. But I wish that I'd sort of stuck with that colorway. But even so, I still think this one's quite nice.
Mm. And I guess that just comes through experience of having made lots of different prints and kind of being able to anticipate a degree of that, and then having temperament to be able to handle
Yeah.
unexpected element process.
Yeah, and you don't want it to be too fixed, do you? You don't want to know exactly what's going to happen. Like for myself, I start with an idea and then develop it as I'm going, because otherwise it feels too formulaic, and there are no, you know, you want the process to inform your decision making while you're working, and you want that sort of creative development, and like, you know, to be able to change your mind and respond to the process as you're working. You don't want to just replicate an idea like something from your sketchbook and then bish bash bosh done. You want it to become something else entirely as you're working. And I think that's the enjoyment of it for me. It's not quite knowing how it will look, but trusting in the process. And I guess that is experience, isn't it? That sort of trust.
And did you find, is it the period where you were at Brighton University and working with students there, is that something that you found is difficult for students when they're kind of first coming to these processes, not to be able to anticipate some of the outcomes, but and being frustrated with the kind of image making potential, or is it a positive thing when you're at a learning stage?
I think it's a positive thing when you're given time. And one of the things that really struck me about working at Brighton University and not being able to speak for all, you know, all universities is just the pressure on the students at that point, and the time pressure, I would say, and where they would get frustrated because it is, you have to make mistakes in order to learn, and you have to give yourself time to be able to understand a process and become familiar with the process in order to then be able to trust it and trust yourself as you're working through it. But So it is an element of time, and there is always a rush and a pressure to get something done for a deadline. And when you're working outside of an educational context, if you're just developing your print practice alongside your life and your job and your family, for example, you want to be able to be great straight away, but you need to be terrible for a good while. You need to make mistakes, and you need to like understand the process slowly. It's not, but through time, I think. And that, yeah, in universities, that's not often, in my experience. There's a lot of demand on the students, and it can be frustrating for them, and then they limit their layers, I suppose. Some folks tend to limit the amount of work that you can put into one print, because you've got to move on to the next thing. Like, for example, this was 7 layers and it took me ages, blooming ages. I would have not gone past all of my deadlines and been kicked out, I'm sure.
It's lucky you were in a more senior position and not a student there.
Yeah, they couldn't kick me out. Should
um,
we move on to the next one?
yeah, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Um, okay, so this is within the same thought process, the same series of thinking, where I took that idea of ideas of evolution and afterlife to another level, where I was thinking about um, if evolution was combined with a almost like a religious frame of thinking, who would the icons be for it? And I've always been really drawn to a lot of religious iconography and a religious artwork, and especially like the use of gold, and like the real celebration and sort of reverence that goes into that art. I really enjoy that, and I'm drawn to that. I love a bit of bling. It's really exciting, and when you you can enjoy a piece of artwork through movement, which unfortunately you can't really do on a screen. But when you walk past a piece of art and it kind of glints and shines at you, I think that's also the one of the things that I really like, that linked to like fish, where you always see them moving and they glint at you, and their scales like look so different at the same time. That's another one of the things that really appealed to me. So this is just a set that I actually did or began in the first lockdown. But again, thinking about time at that point, where there was, all had a lot more time, and I moved to Wales at that point as well, and then wasn't caught up in a lot of the 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 stresses of trying to work in order to live in Brighton, then allowed me more time to really focus on my practice. So I recommend everyone move to Wales. It's great. It's so much better than everywhere. Much more time for your practice. So that's what these images developed from, and this central figure as well does actually include some of the first draw reference images and some of those models as well that I use for that, which is a nice sort of link back.
And the presentation of these as they're kind of referencing icons, as you were saying, like, is that an important part of the outcome of the artwork as well?
Yeah, so these ones, I do have them just as as prints on the paper, but I actually mounted these on blocks to give them like a physical form, so that it kind of felt more like something that you would put up into your house, like a physical object, and like an object of reverence, and that gets a bit more weight to it than just a slightly flimsy piece of paper that you would put on an altar or something. That was just a nice thing to explore, rather than just the traditional forms of framing. And I kind of wanted to give a bit more, yeah, give a bit more reverence to the artwork in itself, I suppose.
Thank you.
Um, should we move on? I can't remember what's next.
For sure.
exciting. Yeah, so throughout all of this, I do like work in sketchbooks. Like I kind of go in and out of different periods of being very heavily sketchbook focused and then never looking at one, or just doing like just life drawing classes or portrait clubs, and that's it. But I do try to keep my thinking within a sketchbook if I can. So they're always like mixed with to-do lists and shopping lists and notes and cocktail recipes and all these different things. And So I thought I would include a few that stood out for me a little bit. So this top right one was when I was doing a 100-day project for myself, where I was at a bit of a rut at the time, and you know, we all go through like different creative like peaks and troughs, and so I was drawing a different bird every day, just going through the alphabet, and I went to the brilliant Booth Museum in Brighton and did a lot of like drawing from the birds there as well. That was a really, really lovely project. Some of them were very squiffy and very quick, and at the end of the day I just did a silly terrible drawing of a bird, and some of them, when I had more energy and more time, were much more developed pieces. So it was just nice to have that creative thing alongside everything, and plus birds are really fun to draw as well. um, and this central image here is part of my thinking through the ideas of the fish patterns. Like we're trying to bring back the patterns into the work, and in trying to think about how to combine these ideas of figurative works. And my work is always figurative, if with people, because that's what I am drawn to, and that's how I'd like to sort of communicate my understanding, I suppose, with figures, with people. And then these lovely, lovely square sketchbooks, great for kind of working out the pattern and fitting that onto the person. I think this was actually drawn in a life class at that last 45-minute pose, where my concentration levels for drawing a figure had gone, but I've always got good concentration for drawing pattern, because you can sort of the switch off a little bit from it, like the mathematics of trying to understand the puzzle and like the repetitive marks. I can always do that if I haven't got the creative capacity to draw something in front of me, to draw something realistic or like from a reference. I can always draw the pattern. And then this bottom sketchbook is actually a drawing of my granddad. So when my granddad passed away, I spent a good amount of time drawing from photographs of him. So I've got a good few sketchbooks with different drawings of him, just to sort of spend some time with him and to try and reinforce his image in my head a little bit, and just to be kind of spending time staring at his face, which you don't often tend to do. And I think as a grieving process, you don't really want to just sit and stare at a photo. I mean, you do want to sit and stare at a photo and try and hold on to the person, but by drawing, I was looking around all at the shapes of his face, and there were lots of like wonderfully candid, awful photos of him pulling like silly faces, and like where nowadays we would delete those off our phones. Like back in like the early 90s and things, we'd still keep all of those really awful pictures, and which really represent his silly face and his fantastic eyebrows. So I as a process of just spending time with him, I did draw a lot of images of him, just to try and keep him in my head, I think, at that time.
That's such a lovely way to be using drawing, and then to be creating more images of him in a sort of personalized way in the book.
Yeah. And then looking back through the sketchbooks, I mean, I can reminded of him, and I'm reminded of the time that I spent drawing him, and all lovely positive associations. And I think it's just a nice way to be able to sit with your feelings and but be occupied at the same time, and just you can't help but think through memories at that point as well. Should we see what I put for the next one?
Yeah.
Remember. Okay, so now we are in planographic printmaking as promised. Um, so so I ended up in fine art printmaking at Brighton University as the lithographic demonstrator, purely by accident. So I was working as the textile print technical demonstrator, which is like the midpoint between being a tutor and a technician. So you get to do the really fun stuff of like working with all the technical equipment and also sort of teaching the students at the same time, and which is like just the perfect job for me. Excellent fun. So I was my job in textile print was a temporary maternity cover. So I was redeployed at the end of that contract and like picked up and put into lithography because there was a vacancy there, and the powers that be at Brighton University were like, well, this kind of printmaking, how different can this printmaking be? We'll just put you in there. Very, very different. So I had no idea what I was doing. Absolutely no idea.
You hadn't done any lithography before?
No, no, no. I had no idea what it was. I knew there were some stones involved, but I couldn't tell you what happened to them. Like that it felt quite scary. And my manager was incredibly cross because he'd just been given this very enthusiastic person who had no idea what she was doing. Like quite rightly, he was, he was cross. But very quickly, I fell in love with the process. Absolutely fell in love with it, and really threw myself into the process, and then now have many presses and many stones and absolutely love it. And it is my main practice, I would say now. But at that point, I had no idea what I was doing. So it was a good amount of time of learning and staying one step ahead of the students as well. And thankfully, most of the students there were doing photolithography, which is a piece of cake, an absolute piece of cake. So stone is much more complicated, but much more rewarding, I think. So I thought I would, as a form of explanation, I would just talk through the very basic process of stone lithography, so that when we come to alternative lithography, you'll have a bit of a grounding for it. So these are all taken. These images are taken from my book, which starts with an explanation of stone, so that you can understand the developments of it. So you would start with limestone, which is like the perfect surface with no inequalities on it at all. So we kind of grind it down so it's lovely and smooth. So there's nothing on it that could get in the way. It's a beautiful surface to draw onto. If you've ever done stone, then you will know the rewarding surface that it is. So it's quite a laborious process to start with, which is the grinding down the stones and cleaning everything off and getting it ready to receive the drawing material. And the main thing to know about lithography is that grease and water repel each other, and it's that part of the process which that fact actually that makes up the whole part of the process that means that it works. So we would draw onto the stone with specialist greasy drawing materials. So I've got some crayons just there. And then apply an etch, which is a mixture of nitric acid and gum arabic. And that etch, it doesn't etch the plate like with like intaglio printing. So there's no sort of corrosion that's happening. So nothing is moving down, nothing is being eaten away. It's just a chemical process which means that grease is absorbed into the stone. So it all stays on this lovely flat surface. And the grease is absorbed into the stone, and then everywhere where you don't have drawing, we have this lovely gum layer which attracts the water. So when we come to print, we print with onto a damp stone, which feels very, very strange for a lot of folks who've never done lithography before. It is a very strange thing. So you have a damp stone, so that that water is protecting your non-image area from your oil-based ink, because we remember that oil and water repel each other, and that oil-based ink sticks to your greasy drawing material, because oil and grease, they like each other, water likes each other, but they don't like not together. Then we put it through a lovely, lovely press, specific kind of press for stone lithography. Frustratingly, because otherwise I'm sure everyone would be doing it, but you need a very strong press in order to hold the weight of these stones. And then you can see that you get a lovely print at the end, which is incredibly faithful to those marks that you've made on the stone. So all of the beautifully delicate drawn marks that you can create, like with it on a drawing, as if you're drawing onto paper, lovely washes, like really sensitive, intuitive marks, they are held on the stone and then can be reproduced. So I think why I love it is that you don't sort of have to put your thoughts and your brain through a filter like you would do if you're doing relief printing, when you have to sort of, you're carving and you're kind of working with the light and the carving out white lines. It's there's none of that really happens. You can just draw onto the stone. It is reflected, which is something that we just have to deal with as printmakers. But it reproduces your drawn marks so faithfully. It's a lovely process if you enjoy drawing. So hopefully that very brief run through. Now you can all do lithography, easy peasy.
And just to clarify, this is like they're heavy bits of stone, right? So
Oh
when
yeah,
you're
yeah.
grinding it, this is a hefty process, and
Yes,
then
yeah.
when you get to the end, you have to grind the surface off again to start another print.
Yeah, it's quite scary once you've ground the stone, and it can take a good while, especially if you encounter any problems, or maybe something's been like really like stubbornly staying in the stone. It can take ages, and I've got a couple of stones that are slightly dipped as well, so they're not going to work in the process. And every now and then I'll come back to them and try and grind them a little bit more until my shoulders ache, and then I'll stop and have a cup of tea and curse the process. So once you've got this lovely fresh piece of limestone that you spent ages grinding, there is a little bit of fear, isn't there, when you think, like that fresh piece of paper when you're going to start drawing, the brand new sketchbook feeling. You think, I've spent ages grinding this, but then we keep going, we keep going.
Thank you. So what is alternative lithography?
Oh, I'll get to that.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Not yet, I think. I
I'm just,
don't think
yeah.
so. No, so next I've got a couple of my actual lithographs to show. We will come to the alternative, I think, in 2 slides time. I think. If I am running, oh God, I'm going quite slow, so I will rush through these. This is one of my first lithographs that I made. Actually, if I move over to this next one, then you get to see this series. So my beginning working with stone, working with the students, obviously getting to know a process. Everything that I did was terrible because I was getting to know it, or it was a teaching aid. So I had to explain to the students how to not do it before I could actually make some work for myself, which was intended. So this is just an example of a series of work that I made in the past few years, which I feel it was a real turning point for my creative practice, I suppose, in a way of me explaining my how I think about the world, and then showing that to everyone else in the world, and to try and communicate some of my thought processes again with this. So this is all stone lithography, but mixed with a little bit of monotype and some card cut as well to make the imagery on the stone. So these are my first lithographs, I would say, that I felt strongly about. That makes sense.
And where are the patterns derived from for these?
So this series of work was again thinking a lot about bereavement and uh, and people that I've lost in the past, and these patterns were taken from their homes. So again, this was another process for me to a very slow process of drawing on the stone, spending time with images of the houses and thinking about the people that I've lost. And obviously, like coming from a textile print background, like pattern has always been a huge part of my brain, I think, and always drawn to patterns. So that the patterns are what I remember from people's houses, and I think the pattern communicates a huge amount about people, and it's a way to express something about yourself, like the patterns that you choose to have around you and the motifs that you have around you. So this one on the left hand side is a really gorgeous orange and brown 70s carpet that was in my grandparents' bungalow. Absolutely adored that carpet. Wish that I'd kept some of it. Actually, I feel quite silly that I didn't keep some of that. Um, so this is just sort of thinking about how these patterns make up who we are, really, and it's an unavoidable thing. We are part of the fabric of all of that. And this one on the right hand side is from a gorgeous carpet that we had in our living room at home, and I spent a lot of time trying to create this pattern with my brother sending me photographs of us as tiny children with a little, like on trikes and things, with like a little bit of carpet in the background, and I would try and draw from these tiny little pictures and remember all the other people that are in the photographs at the same time, and just spend time with that, trying to form these images. So if we move on to the next, I'm going to skip that one because it was mostly a rant about how annoying stone lithography is. So we'll jump past this one. This is something that I've, my latest stone that I've been working on, and it really kicked my butt, this one. It was a real, oh, it was a pain. So I'll jump past it. And then, so this was from, these are some drawings that I did when I was on a residency over in Ireland, in Dundalk, a couple of years ago. And again, linking on from patterns. So I was there for 2 months, spending time researching death rituals in Ireland, and thinking about like historic and folkloric and contemporary attitudes towards death and afterlife while I was there, because the Irish relationship with death is a very individual thing, a really interesting approach and understanding and relationship with death, and a really rich folkloric and mythological like history there that I just wanted to delve into. And so while I was there, I did I collected patterns, and I did a drawing every day. So I did 60 drawings of patterns while I was there, of just things that that took my interest. So some of them were from like the bed sheets, and some of them were from different churches and buildings that I went into, or someone's jumper that caught my eye, this kind of thing. So like just like the patterns and that we kind of like build up and like surrounded me that whole time, that made up my experience of that residency over the 2 months. And this is just a collection of ones that I really enjoyed. And when I had this on display at the I put on a little exhibition at the end of the residency, it was really interesting to see the folks that went to it, what they pointed out and what they associated with the relationships they had with some of these patterns. And one of these ones from a wallpaper in a church really reminded them of going to confession and all the emotions that are kind of like held with that, and really lovely pubs that they all enjoy, for obvious reasons, because pubs are fun. And then the work that came from that, I produced a series of prints, but this is a print that I really felt was very successful. So this is a collection of some of those patterns that I found while I was there, that I just used as part of these figures as a motif to pull things together and to direct the eye, and just because pattern for me is a really enjoyable thing. And this is based on a poem by Danusha Lameres called Feeding the Worms, which I recommend you all read, because it made my whole skin wriggle when it was first read to me. These rooks on the shoulders are sort of linking to some of the folkloric stories from Dundalk, and the figure of the Morrigan, who was the goddess of death in battle. And in one of the stories of Cuchulainn, when the Morrigan landed on the shoulder of Cuchulainn, that was the signifier that he was dead. So I sort of like kept some of these sort of these elements to kind of include a contemporary aspect of thinking about death, alongside some folkloric elements as well. And finally, to come on to the alternative lithography element to it, because this is another cheeky bit of relief print with some monotype, which is planographic. The lines on this and the darker elements of those rooks of polyester plate lithography, which, so in this workshop that I was working in, they didn't have any stone. So if I wanted to do lithography, I would have to use alternative processes. So I decided to work with polyester plate, because in terms of registration, it's incredibly easy to register, and polyester plate is, as it says, it's a sheet of polyester with a rough surface that intends to mimic the surface of a stone. So in terms of like drawing quality, it is quite similar to working onto stone. So I decided to try and keep the drawn element that makes sense for me, especially with this, within the print, rather than trying to carve it all out.
And is it common to use those different combined alternative lithographic processes together?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. I think it should become more common.
Uh-huh.
I think so. I think people tend to
now.
Yeah, everyone go and do it now. I think if you're working on a relief print, people often tend to just stick with relief printing, rather than incorporate other processes into it, because there is a lot of consideration of like the registration and how differently the paper will react, and how you need to change like the quality of the ink in order for this process to sit on top of another process. And there are a lot of technical considerations that go into mixing different families of print, which can be annoying when you encounter problems like that, which I did. But when you can combine the processes, I think it's a lovely way to kind of take the best of this and the best of that, and to bring it all together. Yeah.
I might also just ask Gemini's question, if it's okay, just because I think it's pertinent to this, of whether you think about composition or pattern first when you're developing something like this.
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think composition always comes first, I think. I mean that there is the inevitability of pattern within my work. So of course there's in my mind, I know I want to get in as much pattern as I can. Um, but I think the composition will then lead on to the decision making within the patterns. So whether that comes to thinking about like the size of the pattern, or like and like for this one example, I liked the diagonals like leading the eye with those patterns. And I think yeah, the composition will come first, because I think that is a key part of the communicating of the image, I think. And then bash as much pattern in as I can. There's always space for more.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Um, so then of course we have the book finally. So this book came out about through a desire on my part to make everyone do lithography, basically. Because it is like I say in the book, it is the lesser known form of printmaking. It is an underdog for printmaking, because everyone tends to think of like intaglio prints and etchings for when they think of printmaking, or they'll think of like lino cuts, because that is quite accessible. It's incredibly accessible, so you don't need too much to work with it. But and lithography is a relatively new form of printmaking as well, thinking in the long-term scale. But obviously, to work with stone, um, you need a lot of specialist materials and equipment. But printmakers are a resourceful bunch. So in the past many years since the development of lithography, alternatives have been coming into place. So very quickly after the introduction of like the invention of stone lithography, metal plate lithography was developed, because it's much more portable, and we can't be carrying massive stones around. So after that, many years have passed, and now alternative methods are becoming much more popular. And I think that's also to do with the fact that like art schools can't have all the different kinds of presses, and all these materials, specialist materials, are very expensive. So cheaper and more eco-friendly considerations are now becoming more important. And the fact that all of these processes in my book can be reproduced by hand. Like you don't need a press for a lot for much printmaking. You don't need a press for all of these processes. It makes it a lot more accessible for folks who can't get to a print workshop, or can't afford to buy a press. So within the book, I've got 5 different processes for lithography, different surfaces that can be worked on, which each have their own real interesting strengths to them. Yeah.
Brilliant. And I love that it's a way of bringing printmaking to the masses, because not everyone can be lugging around an 1890 cast iron press in order to make their stone lithographs. But all of
Right.
this is something that's accessible from home in, a few hours of kind of getting set up.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think folks that like you said at the beginning, the printmaking is often a difficult a sell, and people know what painting is, and they see paintings, they know what drawings are, and they understand it. Whereas but if they if folks like myself want to take their imagery much further and develop it a bit more, printmaking and lithography is a really good process for that, because it is so similar, and you don't have to change the way that you're making your marks, but you can include really exciting exploratory things as part of your work, and you have the benefit of the multiples, which is great, because then you have an edition, and that's lovely because you can then share that with lots of folks. But also you don't have to commit to an idea with that. So you can, if you have multiple ideas for a process, you can print a whole bunch of one layer and then test out every single idea on each of your prints. So you don't have to decide what you want to do for your next layers. You can try everything and then try everything again, and I end up with this huge array of prints, and like a whole house full of prints and ink everywhere, like a crazy person's den. It's wonderful being a printmaker.
And how, I'm conscious of time, so I don't want to eat too much into your evening. But I would love to know just how you found the process of writing the book as well, and condensing some of that wonderfully geeky knowledge that you were describing from your technical file that goes right back to your early days of learning and teaching into a book. How was that?
I think because I have a technical file, and because I've been teaching for so long, and because I've been doing online teaching, and like through all of my courses through my Patreon. I've got I had a lot of this information already, so I'd already like written scripts and instructions, and really considered the the language that I was using for a lot of it. It was relatively straightforward to put all of that together into the book, but be able to spend. I really liked being able to use more words, to be able to explain some of these ideas more fully. And I think because I am incredibly evangelical about printmaking, it is really exciting to be able to say, oh, and then there's this, oh, and you can do this as well, oh yeah, and you can do this too, and this is great. So it's nice to be able to kind of put all of that in my head into the book. And luckily, like I've just popped up this slide. I invited 7 professional printmakers who are using these processes to a fantastically high level, and to a very professional standard within their work. So it was really easy to then like pull these people in and share their work, so that all of the elements of teaching in the book, which are relatively straightforward examples, it was really nice to then be able to link to these artists and say that they do this process as well. So even though you've got this book, which is a guide to, like a relatively beginner's guide to this process, which you'll be doing on your kitchen table maybe, you can still make fantastic, high quality professional work, just like these artists have in the book, with relatively humble materials like lino for lino lithography.
Lovely, thank you. I've also got my copy here, so I can flick through myself to find them all.
Good. I think I've just got 2 slides left, which are which are drawings from different things that I've been on. But I also appreciate that we could end with this, depending on the timings that if people need to go.
I would like to end on drawing, please, and tell us what the thrust of your work is at the moment.
Drawing.
It all comes back to drawing eventually.
Always drawing. So um, so with all of that to one side, I in November, we went on a residency to Inisheer, where I deliberately wasn't working too much with printmaking. Like printmaking is always on my mind, but I wanted to think about moving on from this body of work, which was all about grief and bereavement, and thinking working through an awful lot of that for myself, and I felt like I'd done that, and I got to a good place, and I was feeling okay. And all of that process of those work really helped me through that bereavement. But I wanted to make something else, which wasn't still digging on that, but still has a similar link. So I moved on to a body of work thinking about trees and sacred spaces within nature, I suppose. So while we were on residency, on a tiny island with like 4 trees, I, I spent a lot of time trying to reconnect with my sketchbook, and actually really enjoyed working with charcoal, which moves in a way which is not um, which is not very printerly. It's difficult to articulate, but with charcoal, it smushes and it moves and it comes away and it goes back, and it's not set like when you're doing a layer of print, it's there. And like if you're working on a stone, there is an element of like removal and addition, but not in the same way as charcoal. And I really enjoyed the fluidity of that and the flexibility of that. Um, and then was thinking through ideas of how to still incorporate pattern within this, but on a small island where there was very, very little pattern. It was very challenging for me. So my focus really did move on to trees and the movement of trees, and thinking and the shapes, I suppose, of trees. And so this is a body of work that I'm still working through. And I had the realization recently that the drawing doesn't have to become a print. That the drawing is of value as a drawing, but my mindset is always like, oh, make it into a print and then share it with everyone. But as a singular drawing, that's okay. It can just stay as a singular drawing, which is much less work, actually. It's great.
But then you can't share it around quite so much. It is unique and can only be shown in one place.
Yes, yeah, all kept for me, actually. I think I was thinking in terms of like, oh, I could like sell these drawings, but actually I want to keep them for me. And I think that's really an interesting mindset to be in, of having making one thing and then just keeping it. Um, and then if I go on to my last slide, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
So uh, last week, I think it was last week. Yeah, last week I was on Ennis Entley on Bardsey Island for the week. So again, to another island. There's something really lovely about being in an enclosed on a small island where you have to focus on what's there. And on this island, I just took my sketchbook and I just took my drawing materials. And it was only there for the week. So when we were on Inishir, we had the studio space, and we had the time to think. We had the time to overthink, which is what I did a lot of the time. And there was the potential to take work out of the sketchbook and then develop it. But for this week, I was just working with what I had in the sketchbook, and there was no space to go back and work it up anywhere else, and there was no signal either, so no phone signal for distraction, and no electricity, so no distraction of being able to go back to the house and work in under some light bulbs. So I had to really focus on the time that I had to be drawing outside. And like I said earlier, like that aspect of having time was really lovely. And I started off by walking for 5 minutes, stopping, and then drawing for 15 minutes. And then after that, I would set my timer again, walk for another 5 minutes, draw for another 15 minutes, just to try and get my eye into to just to start drawing, just to see something I could quickly, and then just to draw. And I very quickly became obsessed with the gorse. The gorse is just incredible on the island, of really amazing spaces and really interesting shapes, and like the almost like limbs. It's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous gorse. And I was really drawn to this space, where and there was not a lot of shade on the island, but this arrangement of gorse, the sheep, you could tell it loved to sit amongst this gorse. This was like a almost like a shelter, and there were bits of sheep wool like attached to all of the gorse around it, and it made me think. It made me put me in the mind of like rag trees, were like really special and significant, and trees for people. Like people would like pilgrimage there and tie their rag on, and it would have a real significance for them. And it made me feel like this was that place, but for the sheep. And I really enjoyed that as a link back to some of those trees that we had on Inisheer, where there were like offerings and things tied to the trees, and it was a special and significant place for people. Like this tree was just like this area of gorse was for the sheep. And so those 15 minutes of drawing then slowed down and became like 2 hours of drawing and real focus on that space, because I had the time and the light was changing, so I had to stay in that spot and just draw. It was absolutely wonderful. So and I went to the island with 4 other artists. We went as a group to experience it. And there's an exhibition coming up at Oriel Marion, which is in Dufferin near us, and the curator of that gallery was one of the artists with us. So they were all making work with that in mind, and thinking about the like the pilgrimage route that ends on Bardsey, and those 20,000 saints that are buried on the island, and all of the significance that it has, and the wonderful wildlife. And then they were all drawing, well, like photographing the wildlife and the amazing views, and I had a sketchbook full of gorse, and I loved it. I had a lovely time, sat around sheep poo, drawing the gorse. Gorgeous. So there we go.
And that's where we shall find you from now on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much, Scarlett, for taking us on this journey. um, if I just take you off of screen share, or in fact, would you be able
Oh, of
to
course. Yeah.
promote? Thank you for joining us for the talk. And I'm going to put this up on YouTube next week as well. So everyone can come back. You can rewatch it yourself. And I'll just say to everyone, if you were interested in finding out more about lithography, do have a look at some of Scarlett's online courses through her Patreon, and the new book as well, Alternative Lithography. So there are various different links in the chats. And if anyone's really keen to just work alongside other printmakers or ask printmaking questions, Scarlett runs a free Zoom print club. And there's just a little link to that going up in the chat, because that's this Sunday. So if you wanted to join that, you would be very welcome to. Otherwise, thank you all so much for coming tonight and for joining us. We normally take a summer break from our etc. talks, but by popular demand, we're going to add some extra ones in over the summer, but we haven't yet confirmed our speakers. So watch this space. Keep an eye on our social media for our future speakers. But this concludes our planographic printmaking term. Thank you so much, Scarlett. And thank you all for joining us. It's been a joy to have you all here.